2003 was an exciting year for Star Wars fans. Raven Software's Jedi Academy, the FPS-style final chapter of the Dark Forces Jedi Knight series that loosely follows the events of Return of the Jedi, was released on PC, Mac, and Xbox. Rogue Squadron 3 Rebel Strike by Factor 5 dropped on the Nintendo GameCube, offering players a chance to dive into all of the memorable space battles from the original trilogy. A Game Boy Advance title developed by Pocket Studios called Flight of the Falcon allowed gamers to take on the role of Han Solo and Chewbacca as they fought off waves of Imperial forces. Sony Online Entertainment had finally launched Star Wars Galaxies, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game based on the worlds of Star Wars that took place in the short span of time between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. BioWare released a PC and Xbox-based RPG set 4,000 years before the events of the films called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Cartoon Network would start presenting a series of animated shorts that linked the events of 2002's Attack of the Clones with the upcoming third chapter, Revenge of the Sith. Obviously, we're here to focus on the gaming side of things and how a possible public outcry may have resulted in one of the smarter moves in video game history. Historically, movie tie-in games have performed less than admirably. The hurried schedule to rush out a game to coincide with the release of a major motion picture is, more often than not, met with ugly, poorly designed, and shallow results. No exception to this rule, the Star Wars franchise suffered through a particularly dark age in the video game medium. Like Peter Brady struggling to find his own identity, 200 gold stars to anyone who gets that reference, the Star Wars property was put through the ringer with games ranging from a Twisted Metal-style Demolition Derby outing to a 3D fighter Tekken clone and even a party racer that resembled Nintendo's Mario Kart. While some of these games found an audience and performed quite well, majority of them fell by the wayside as yet another example that developers, and LucasArts for that matter, were only interested in the short-term quick buck. In 1999, Sony Interactive Studios America released a massive multiplayer online game called EverQuest, a subscription-based game boasting a 3D presentation and a vast immersive world for players to explore either solo or in a party with their friends. It wasn't the first game to offer these components, but it was the first one to offer them all up together in what appeared to be a perfect gamer storm. It soon trounced the competition and would eventually change the landscape of the video game industry and give rise to some of the most popular titles today. Seeing the popularity of EverQuest and the money it was bringing in, not only on units sold but also through subscriptions, others would attempt to recreate that lightning in a bottle with less than stellar results. Rather than tread this unknown territory on their own, LucasArts decided to go to the source and offer Sony the chance to perform that EverQuest magic yet again within the Star Wars universe. When the news hit, fans were beside themselves with shock and excitement that they would soon be flying hyperspace lanes and learning the ways of the Force while exploring the world that they've been forced so long to experience from only one side of the screen. They would soon learn that the grass was definitely not greener on the other side. LucasArts held lofty ambitions for this title, originally slated for an April 2003 release with availability on the Xbox and PlayStation 2 platforms as well as the PC. These plans would quickly fall apart as the game would continue to get pushed back until finally, LucasArts made the announcement on June 17th that the game would be released 9 days later. On July 26, 2003, Star Wars Galaxies was released to the public. The game was initially met with mostly positive reviews, praising its lush graphics, liberal use of movie soundtracks, massive world size, character customization, creative creature ecology, a complex skill system, player economy interdependencies, and its sandbox approach. However, reviewers also largely criticized the overwhelming complexity of the game, from the PvP-PvE combat imbalances of the professions to bugginess and lack of quest content. All of those things would pale in comparison to one Sarlacc-sized bone of contention, creating a Jedi character. For every player who aspired to be like Captain Solo and illegally run spice and supplies from one heavily guarded Imperial outpost to another, there were 5 more who wished to learn the ways of the Force and serve as a guardian of peace and justice in the galaxy. While the path of the Jedi shouldn't be an easy one, Sony's approach proved to be far too complex and ill thought out. Players who wished to play as a Jedi character had to first unlock their Jedi ability slot by fulfilling an unknown list of criteria, which usually involved earning max levels in a randomized set of other character specializations. It was never the same thing twice, and the only way a player knew they were successful was if they were visited by a cloaked and hooded figure who would give them a holocron item, setting them down their journey to Jedi knighthood. Gaming sites and players criticized Sony for the substantial time commitment to unlock a Jedi, penalties for in-game death of a Jedi character, which was permanent after 3 deaths, and monotonous gameplay required to acquire a Jedi character. Developers responded in January of 2004 by changing the penalty for death to skill loss and eventually creating a quest system to unlock a Force-sensitive character. Unfortunately, it was too little, too late. Meanwhile, some Xbox and PC owners were having a very different experience with a unique role-playing game that took place in the familiar Star Wars universe, but involved none of the main characters or situations featured in the films. In fact, the game takes place roughly 3,000 years before Jedi Master Yoda would be born. BioWare's Knights of the Old Republic introduced a system based on the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars role-playing game, which, in turn, was based on the D20 role-playing game system derived from the 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons rules. Winning awards for Best Story and Best Character Development, to name just a few, the game followed the adventures of a mysterious Force user who, through a series of moral choices, would earn the title of Jedi Knight to bring balance or ruin to the Republic. With a twist rivaled only by that pinnacle moment between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back, Knights of the Old Republic would go on to win multiple Game of the Year awards and earn a spot in IGN's list of top 100 games of all time. It didn't take long for fans to start buzzing about the triumph of Knights of the Old Republic versus the failure of Star Wars Galaxies. Search just about any Star Wars or gaming site and chat board, and you would eventually see the question asked, why won't LucasArts let BioWare develop a Star Wars MMO? In December of 2011, Star Wars fans would get their wish. Set 300 years after the Knights of the Old Republic series and roughly 3,500 years before the events of the films, Star Wars The Old Republic offers players the chance to take part in a great galactic civil war between Republic and Empire, Jedi and Sith. Understanding that the story aspect is of key importance to fans, BioWare dedicated their efforts to ensure that this game would have more story content than all of their other games combined. In fact, the writing team worked on the project longer than any of the other development teams working on the game. An October 2008 preview noted that some of the 12 full-time writers had been working on The Old Republic for more than 2 years at that point. This is immediately evident when you realize that each of the 8 playable character classes not only share in many common storylines and missions, but also enjoy several scenarios crafted exclusively for their class while building relationships not only with other player characters, but also with a handful of NPCs. A gameplay mechanic constructed of various moral choices that has become a bit of a BioWare staple and has spanned from the Knights of the Old Republic series to Jade Empire and most recently in the Mass Effect video games would guide your character. This makes for a gameplay experience which is very unique for an MMO. The character depth and vast storylines give the player a feeling that they truly are the central character of this epic story. While the locations are diverse and lush, it's overwhelmingly apparent that BioWare sacrificed the vast explorable landscapes that players enjoyed in Galaxies for a more character-focused adventure. Depending on what type of player you are, this could be a pleasant refinement or a disappointing setback. Character customization in the Old Republic doesn't quite seem to hold a candle to the massive options players had when creating the physical look of their avatars in Galaxies. In most MMOs, players will have the option to retain a certain physical look when activating a new piece of armor. You aren't generally forced to wear said equipment. The Old Republic, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be able to offer that option yet. Thus, players tend to look like a patched-together mess. Hopefully, those options will grow as the game develops further. Where the game falls short in customization options and explorable landmass, it more than makes up for with easily accessible navigation and battle controls and a finely balanced presentation that offers the pickup and playability of games like City of Heroes, but also the more in-depth raid systems similar to that of World of Warcraft. Again, the bright, shining crown jewel of the Old Republic is the writing. Players will find themselves emotionally invested in their character and ultimately caring about seeing their personal missions through to the end, not only for the XP and monetary rewards, but also for that personal sense of accomplishment. Only a couple of months old, it already seems that BioWare has brought balance, for the most part, back to the Force in a Star Wars MMO that finally gives fans the gaming experience they've been longing for. For PopCultureOverload.com, I'm Joe Cucinotti. The Force will be with you, always.